Everybody, it's Flake again, and I've got another deck brew that you guys should give a try. Again, not necessarily tier 1 stuff coming out of this show here, but it's definitely something interesting, fun, new-ish, I guess. But I've given it a whirl in Best of 1 and Best of 3, both of which had some successes for it. So it's not necessarily completely out of left field. You can definitely win some games and try something new with this, so I hope that you guys enjoy it. Here is Karnfire. We'll come up with a name later. Alrighty, so the deck list is kind of like a artifact-based deck. It revolves around a lot of early life gain with Fountain of Renewal, a lot of card draw as much as possible, and the removal power of black. Now, the win condition in here is twofold. You can win by overloading creatures after removing a lot of your opponent's threats, or you can just Banefire them right in their mouth for a crap ton of damage and win that way. Now, we'll go through the cards real quick here, and I'll then discuss why I chose these cards and what the general strategies are and how to play it more or less. Now, a lot of the time, this deck just needs practice to get going, but we've fine-tuned it a lot, and it's at a place where I'm very happy with it. It's very fun, and you get a lot of options with it. So to begin the deck and the card list for it, we open up with 4 times Fountain of Renewal. Fountain of Renewal keeps you in the game, plus you want to be putting down artifacts. Artifacts are an important part of it, and this is a perfect one-drop to sort of keep you in play against mono-red burn decks, and just let you hang around while your opponent might just throw down creatures and sort of blast you with damage. Now, if you're playing control, a lot of the life that you're going to gain isn't necessarily going to matter if they have alternate win conditions, things like Nexus or Fog and stuff like that. Nonetheless, having this on the board does beef up your Karn constructs, which we'll get to later. I have a copy of Argyl's Bloodfast because drawing cards in this deck is crucial and it's difficult. I don't like sacking Fountain of Renewal unless I need to in order to get cards if I'm quote-unquote desperate, so to speak. But Argyl's Bloodfast, one of in there, is not bad. You just drop it in, and you know, paying the life is not the biggest deal, mainly because of the fact that Fountain of Renewal is going to get you that stuff back. I'd be a lot less inclined to use the pay 2 life draw card if you're playing against mono red burn, or if life total is going to really come into play early on. Nonetheless, there it is. I've got 3 cast downs. 3 cast downs in there are, I mean, the main list that I'm showing you right now is if you want to play it in a more creature-heavy environment. Things like Golgari, things like, you know, some Boros weenies or white weenies or stuff like that that's coming at you, or mono-red. These are the environments where this deck list is going to be most prominent. I then tuned up the sideboard more for control, and we'll go through that later, but 3 times cast down and 2 times moment of craving, depending on what you're coming up against. If it's a lot of mono red, you want to probably ditch the cast downs and put 4 moment of cravings. Those are going to be a lot more important if you're dealing with mono red. Otherwise, cast down, moment of craving, these 2 are going to be good against. The cast downs are going to be good against Izzet Drakes. It's going to be good against Golgari and stuff like that. Now, down the road, more artifacts. Treasure maps. Treasure maps are fantastic. And I know there are other people out there who have been on Treasure Map forever, and it's a great card. We got 4 of them because they help you not only just cycle through your deck, but those treasure tokens eventually become card draw, and they also beef up your Karn constructs, and they offer you red mana for Banefire. So that's why we have it in here. Throw them down. You can have 2, 3, 4 out at a time. They're not legendary, so don't worry about it. Keep cycling, scry as much as possible. At some point, you can just dump out. The most I've had, I think, was like 7 or 8 treasure tokens on at a time. And then at the end of it, you're just tapping to destroy them, scrying, drawing cards, and making sure that you get the cards you need. Make sure that if you're not finding the red mana you want, that you're keeping one of those bad boys out there for red to activate Banefire. Or sometimes it's not the worst case in the world to just keep the actual treasure tokens on the ground to make sure your Karn constructs are just, excuse me, enormous. 3-time Golden Demise. Again, this is purely to deal with decks that go wide early, tokens, things of that nature. White weenie decks and things like that. These also, the Andantos die to Golden Demise. Selesnya is no longer that big of a deal. If you're lucky, this will clear out a lot of mono red garbage, wizards, and if they throw down a Steamkin early or a Viashino Pyromancer, Fanatical Firebrands, things like that. That's what the Golden Demise is for, keeps you in the game also. Now here's the fun part. This is where this gets a little bit more interesting. Phylactery Lich. The Phylactery Lich is a very interesting card that one of my viewers put me on. He's like, you should take a look at this. And I did, because it's pretty damn cool. For 3 mana, you're getting a 5/5 indestructible. So you're thinking that for that type of mana return, or that type of return for 3 mana, you'd think that it must have some kind of crazy setback. But the setback in this is basically what you do is when you play it, you put a counter on a artifact, and as long as that artifact is still on the board, or as long as an artifact has one of those Lich tokens on it, then the Phylactery Lich can stay in play. As soon as the artifact's gone, the Lich is gone. So you're essentially tying the existence of this creature to a particular artifact or a token on an artifact. So the cool part about the Phylactery Lich is that it's 5/5 and it's indestructible. So it's pretty much going to be there to eat damage as it comes in and pressure your opponent early, with a whole bunch of options for early game artifacts, 4 Fountains of Renewal, 4 treasure maps, and down here for Power Stone shards. You have all kinds of awesome options to make sure that when you're playing the Phylactery Lich, it has a home. It has something to latch onto so that it can exist on the board. It's not your win condition, but it very well could be. If you can get 2 or 3 of these down early and pressure your opponent, then they might just have to sit back and just accept their fate. Depends on what you're playing against. Obviously, if you're playing against Drakes, you can just go and smash face with this. If you're playing against more aggro decks, maybe you sit back with this card while you establish the board, get your Fountains of Renewal to pop off for multiple turns to keep you alive. Nonetheless, Power Stone Shard, this is purely to A, give you more mana, obviously, B, another artifact presence for your Phylactery Lich or to power up your Karn constructs. But at the same time, these are excellent fuel for your Banefire. Because if you have 2 of them on the board, it becomes 4 mana. If you have 3, it's 9. And if you have 4 on the board, it is 16 mana to fuel your Banefire, which is insane. So the best thing to do really is just to throw them down there and make sure that, once that Banefire comes into play, you have your red mana. You just need 4 of these and like 3 other mana. You can bust down anything on the board with 20 health or so. So there's that whole thing. Now, Phyrexian Scriptures is your board wipe. I was toying around with Ritual of Soot. The problem with Ritual of Soot is that it kills... actually, no, it doesn't, because of Indestructible. Never mind. But I found that Phyrexian Scriptures is a better board clear than for 4 mana because of the fact that it goes beyond all the crap that's on the board that's above 3 cost. Things like, it'll take care of your Carnage Tyrants and things that are otherwise untouchable. All the big things like the Drakes, etc., the Crackling Drakes, the Niv Mizzets, and all the other stuff. Phyrexian Scriptures will just wipe the board. And then beyond that, especially against Golgari, it'll wipe out their graveyards after 3 turns. So a lot of the Find Finality, or the Find aspect of Find Finality, is no longer in play. Things that play out of the graveyard, no longer in play. Drakes are going to get screwed by this because of the fact that you're exiling all of their spells and sorceries out of their instants and sorceries out of their graveyard. So Phyrexian Scriptures × 2, board wipe, pretty good. Also, keeps your constructs alive, and if you have a Phylactery Lich on the board, perfect, no problem. Everything's fantastic. Beyond that, I got 4 Vraska's Contempt purely to deal with the more annoying things like the Rekindling Phoenixes or the Planeswalkers. Those are going to be probably what are driving you the most insane. Now, if you're playing against Teferi and stuff, you're going to have to go into the sideboard. Vraska's Contempt, with only 4 of them out there, your win condition is going to be Banefire and whatnot, so you might have to sort of ramp up to that and make sure that you get it to go. But again, this list that as you see it right now, this 60-card list is purely to deal with more creature-based decks and not necessarily the heavy control of like Turbo Fog and Nexus and all that stuff. Finally, let's go to Karn, Scion of Urza ×4. This bad boy over here is purely to sort of draw cards early, but if you have 3 or 4 of your artifacts on board, sometimes it's better to just go -2 and create a construct. That construct is going to be a 5/5 or a 6/6, which could potentially create a lot of problems early on, especially if you're popping a treasure map into more treasure tokens. So that just becomes bigger and badder and nastier. Play your cards, draw your cards if you need to, but a lot of the times don't be shy to go -2 on this to create your Karn constructs. And then finally, Banefire. Banefire is Banefire. I mean, what else is there to say? It's your win condition, it's your blast face and go home kind of card. This has had issues in dealing with decks that gain a lot of life, obviously, in which you might want to play more construct heavy strategy versus Banefire, waiting to just Banefire your opponent. Again, it's going to take some practice and sort of making sure that you understand what your opponent's win conditions are and what's going on there. Nonetheless, you've got some options on how to do this. Lots in this deck is meant to just kind of keep the board thin while you cycle your deck and get the cards you need. And further beyond that, let's go into the land section. 3 Cabal Strongholds, 14 Swamps, 4 Dragon Skull Summits, 1 Arc of Vraska, and 1 Detection Tower. It pretty much speaks for itself. The Cabal Strongholds with the Swamps makes for a extra sauce for those Banefires. Not to mention, it really goes the distance when, let's say, you have 8-9 Swamps on the board and a Cabal Stronghold. You're really getting extra bang for your buck from your mana pool in order to do things like draw with Arc of Vraska or just blast face with Banefire. It's not that uncommon to blast face with Banefire for 16, 17, or 18 damage, so don't be too afraid of that. Now, I'll go through it again before we go into the sideboard. So 4 Fountain of Renewal, 1 Arguel's Bloodfast, 3 times Cast Down, 2 times Moment of Craving, 4 Treasure Maps, 3 Golden Demise, 4 Phylactery Lich, 4 times Power Stone Shard, 2 Phyrexian Scriptures, 4 Vraska's Contempt, 4 Karn, Scion of Urza, 2 Banefires. I also have in the land department 3 Cabal Strongholds, 14 Swamps, 4 Dragon Skull Summits, 1 Arc of Vraska, and 1 Detection Tower. Now this is probably going to get better once Allegiance comes out, because you'll get the extra shock lands, which do count as swamps as well, so that's pretty solid. Okie day. So let's go into the sideboard. The standard sideboard MVP is Duress. You're gonna want to throw all 4 of these if you're playing against any type of Teferi deck all the time. 3 Sorcerer's Spyglass is because it depends on what you're playing against, but against something like Teferi, Karn, you want those Spyglasses in there, not just because they're artifacts, which is an added bonus, but you want to make sure that you can lock down Teferi, make him useless, lock down Karn, make him useless, or if your opponent's just playing a crap ton of weird Planeswalkers, go ahead, Angrath or Nicol Bolas and stuff like that, no problem. I got a Ritual of Soot in the sideboard as well, just in case there is, Golgari really suffers a lot from Ritual of Soot. I threw that one in there. I've got 4 times Eldest Reborn, again, for the more control-oriented matchups. Smoke out that 1 Carnage Tyrant on the board. Get rid of that, get rid of that 1 Teferi they've got once they've sort of tapped out, or take their Karn. There's a lot of great things that you can do with Eldest Reborn that gives you alternate win conditions and keeps you in the game. Star of Extinction, I got 1 times, just in case, if it's a lot of, it's a toolbox, right? So you kind of want to make sure that you're prepared. Wherein it's very rare you'll throw that in there. I'm sure you could probably decide what a better sideboard card is. Star of Extinction, I threw it in there because it deals with creatures and Planeswalkers, all the like. It's kind of like a get out of jail free. It's your panic button, more or less. And another Banefire, just in case. If we're playing against control, you want to find the Banefires fast. And not to mention, you also want to make sure that if it's like Dimir or something that you're playing against, you don't want them to get Thought Erasured out of your hand. So you want to have extra ones just fishing around in case. So there's the sideboard. And yeah, that's pretty much the deck. Again, Karnfire, Bane, Karn, Carnage, I don't know how we want to call it, nonetheless. I've had a lot of fun with this deck, and there's been all kinds of interesting moments with it as well. Some wins, some losses, of course. It's not tier 1, but it's something worth trying if you're kind of looking for something a little bit new. I will talk a little bit more about the strategy around it and a little bit about my experience with it, but there is the list, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, that is Karnfire. So with the list down pat, you can kind of go ahead and give it a whirl. Obviously, there's a lot of room for, I want to say improvement, obviously, but there's a room for tailoring and tinkering it to your own liking. So I'll tell you how I play it more or less. The way that I play this deck is very much just, you know, the land system is fairly easy to get by. You're not going to be really fighting for different lands. Now, triple black for the Phylactery Lynch might give you a little bit of fits early on, especially since you need an artifact early, but there are a lot of options for early artifacts to throw in. So basically, you're throwing down the Fountain of Renewal whenever you can in order to just sort of build up a pool of life force and to keep you in the game early against an early creature onslaught. With your removal spells, your 2-mana removal spells like Cast Down and Moment of Craving should give you enough of a some breathing space while you continue to build your board and get lucky enough to throw down a Phylactery Lich or two, which are anchored to, preferably you want them anchored to a Power Stone Shard, but if you can't, then the next best would be a Fountain of Renewal, and then last would be a Treasure Map or a Treasure Token. That said, you know, it's better off to put a Phylactery Lich on the board and keep a Treasure Map there with the token on it before getting the actual tokens, because that 5/5 indestructible early can really change the game. So what I do is I you know, once you're done with your mulligans, etc., throw down your Fountain of Renewal if you can, keep some spells depending on what you're playing against, and then just proceed. You want to make sure that Karn hits the board, and depending on the state of the actual your opponent's board, if the opponent's board is clear, you're drawing cards with Karn, obviously, but you gotta sort of decide what the deal is here. If there's only one creature on the board, it might be in your best interest to go -2 on the Karn, create a construct that is beefed up by either a Fountain of Renewal or two, the Power Stone Shard, etc., and then you go from there. Pressure wherever you can, but make sure that you want to keep the board clean for that Banefire eventually, and even beyond that, getting those Karns to really spit out those big tokens. Treasure maps will eventually become 3 treasures, which really beef up those constructs. So if you're figuring that if you don't have Banefire in hand, you don't have a source of red mana, let's say, maybe Karn, those constructs are important, so you gotta decide that early on. So beef up the board wherever you can. Your Phyrexian Scriptures, sometimes you want to play it with nothing on the board. Just keep that board clean, because you are winning this game once, you know, in the 30 to 40 card range, meaning that there's, you know, 20 to 30 cards left in the deck. So you're going the distance with this. You'll have no problems finding the cards you want with the amount of treasure maps scrying through your deck, and hopefully drawing cards as well with like Arc of Orazca and you know, Argyl's Bloodfast. But try it out. Again, depending on what you're playing, the sideboard in the best of 3. I've done best of 3 with this, and I've had some pretty good success, especially against control. But control against this this main list that we showed you is going to be a little bit of a struggle. So don't get discouraged. Again, this is not a tier 1 deck, and there's all kinds of room to really plug and play the kinds of artifacts that you want in it. So don't worry about it. Some people have suggested, you know, some of the more legendary artifacts to kind of throw in there, and you know, it's up to you. I even made this deck without the Phylactery Liches, but I like them for early game pressure and presence to really make your opponent have to think about things of attacking and this and that. They're great walls. They just sit there, and worst case is you just start smashing face. Mono red has a fit when you can get 2 or 3 Fountains of Renewal on the board, especially with the Moments of Craving really keeping you in the game. But you'll learn to really appreciate this deck once you kind of figure out the little minutia of how to go about you know, winning the game against each and every opponent that you face. Nonetheless, Probably don't take this to a tournament if there's a lot on the line, but definitely give it a shot and let me know what your suggestions are. You can always go ahead and reach out to me on Twitter at WatchFlake or on Twitch at twitch.tv/WatchFlake. That's the one. Of course, your comments over here on YouTube are always most appreciated. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for all your suggestions. If you have any other weird deck lists or combinations that you want to see, go ahead and reach out to me. If not, please drop your comments, your likes, your follows, your subscriptions, all that love right over here. Again, my name is Flake. Be kind to one another, and I will see you very soon.